what can be the next stage of the citizen card. And if during these two sessions we identify an opportunity, we have all the partners and the work that we did during Card for All to apply for a more ambitious project that can allow all the cities to move for the next level of the citizen card. So I would like to thanks to Rico for accepting our challenge, and I will give the floor now to Rico.
Okay, thanks, Miguel. So let's start with this. So we are all more than familiar now with all the procedures. So just to remind you, first of all, to let you know that we will be recording the session. So I always forget to do it in the right time. I did it again, but I started recording about 5 minutes ago. I think I missed your introduction, Laura, but I still got Miguel's. And so I think everybody is okay with that. So that's to give an opportunity for other participants that will not be able to attend today. If they want them to see the session, they will have this opportunity. So we will record it. We are doing it now. And in principle, we will also do an edited version. So a shorter version, just a video with the highlights, with the main moments. We will ask our team in order to do that. You know, we have some days available in the ad hoc expertise for that, so we may also do that, and that becomes also a more interesting deliverable from this training session. So like Laura and Miguel said, so the idea is that we'll have two of these training sessions. So the first one today is to give you an overview of what is being planned, what is there, and some inside experience from some of the European programs which could be suitable for pursuing activities in this area of city cards. So we will see the introduction in a little while, and we will look at what programs we will be looking at. The session, it's expected to last for up to 2 hours, so until 2 o'clock European time. That will be the maximum, so we expect to end at 2 o'clock. You know, it may be a little bit shorter depending on your number of questions, the level of discussions that we are able to generate with this session. But we do not expect it to go over 2 o'clock. That will be long enough, and then we will all need to have lunch. And then we will book a second session, again for approximately 2 hours, which is expected to be more practical, with some more examples and practical hints of how you could develop hopefully successful proposals for specifically the example of Horizon Europe. But what we will be discussing, I think it will also be useful for other of the programs that we will see today. So that's the plan. So I've muted all of you, so I ask you as usual to remain muted if you are not speaking. But if during the presentation you want to put a question, just unmute yourself and put the question forward. You can raise your hand, but you know it's a lot of people, so I cannot guarantee that I will be paying enough attention to the raised hands. If I see a raised hand, I will give you the floor, but I may not see it. So if you like to put a question, you can raise your hand, but you can also unmute yourself and just put the question forward, just intervene in the discussion. And you know, the more discussion we are able to generate, the more questions we have, so the better. So don't hesitate if you have something to ask or something to add, to give your own expertise, your own experience about participating in a proposal, in a project. If you want to add something, please just go ahead and do it. Otherwise, if you are not intervening, try to stay muted so that we have the minimum noise as background for the presentation. For the camera, it's up to you, you know, to leave it on or off as you'd like, and depending also on the level of your connection. We have up to now 18 participants, still a few people missing as normal and as expected. So I'll keep an eye for admissions. I think also, Miguel, you can see the people in the lobby and admit them. So once I start with the presentation, I ask you if you could pay attention to that, and if someone comes into the lobby to admit them. So it is one thing less that I have to pay attention. So I will just go briefly through the people that we have now so that we see who is participating. I will follow the order that I see in here, which is alphabetic order. So we have with us Adriana Casaco from SUSEAVA, so she's there. We have presented as Agnese, but now we know it's not really Agnese. It's from Torino. It's Oriana Spano. We have Oriana Spano with us as well. We have Ana Rocha from Aveiro. We have Angela Cunha as well from Aveiro. We have Born A from Rotterdam, right, from the municipality of Rotterdam. We have this Kate F. R71. Who is this? Kate F. R71, so I cannot see.
Probably Caterina, I don't know.
Caterina
Sorry.
Hi.
Hi, okay, so it was difficult from the name. There
Yeah.
you are. So we have Gabriela Lazar from SUSEAVA. We have Gabriele Raimundo from, it is Gabriele Mulas, right, from Sassari, there he is. We have Gio Maria Pidezo from, it is Gio Maria Pidezo from, okay, exactly. Thank you. We have Leva Spomberger, right, from Jurmala. She's there. We have Ilona Donina from Riga, City Council. We have Irina Niscolescu. Okay, Irina, she's here. She's from SUSEAVA as well. We have Costas Karamarcos.
Morning. Hi, Miguel.
Hi, which is a Urbact expert, is involved in the Urban network. We have Laura, the coordinator of the project, of course. We have Miguel, the main expert. We have Morgan Umbret from Clermont-Ferrand, and we have Ralph with us from Jurmala. So I think I got everybody, and then more people may be able to join in. So let's start. I will share the presentation. Here it is. Okay. So you should be able to see it, right? In big screen. Okay. There you are. Okay. Sorry. Not the one I wanted. It's too many presentations open. It's this one. That's the one I want to. Okay. Okay, so you see it, right? Good. Yes, everybody see it? Okay, perfect. So we can start now. Oops. Oops, what happened now? Wait a minute. Let me again share the content. Oops, what happened? Is here. It's here. Now you see it again?
Yeah.
Yeah, and now if I see page down, it's in the last one. I understand why. Okay, we have to move to the first one. Sorry, I spoil a little bit the surprise, but let's go to the start. There we are. Now we are in the start. Okay, so online training session from Car4All. My name is Eurico Neves. I'm ad hoc expert for this project. I've already participated at least in one meeting, yes, at Clermont-Ferrand before all this started, and meetings were stopped. Then I participated in a couple of online meetings, but not the same experience. So I've been in contact with some of you, but not with all of you. We have also some external participants. So thank you for participating. And one more time, so we'll be discussing some of the opportunities and the funding lines that will be available. Feel free to interrupt, put questions whenever you want, so please don't hesitate to do that. We'll be looking at the context, what we have in front of us for the next programming period from this year until 2027, so for the next 7 years. And then we'll go quickly through what is the city's positioning, what is expected in terms of positioning of the cities for this next program of funds, what has changed from different periods. And then we will look at where are the main funding opportunities at European level, starting with the urban innovative actions, looking at Horizon Europe, Interreg, and the European territorial cooperation programs in general, then very briefly, other programs. So we focus on programs at European level, where cities from different countries can cooperate. We'll end up with space for questions, more comments, and experience from your side. So, starting with the context, things are now moving fast, following the normal periods for adoption of all this programming at European level. The European Parliament's consent has been given in mid-December last year, and now the Council has adopted the regulation for the European Union, the MFF, as it's named, so the Multi-Annual Financial Framework, which will regulate all the funding of the European Union for this period. This includes a long-term EU budget of 1,000 billion, so 1,000 millions, billion in the American nomenclature, for the EU 27 at 2018 prices, including the integration of the European Development Fund, which is now integrated in this multi-annual financial framework. Then we have the next generation EU recovery instrument, which has been agreed by the countries to prepare the recovery from the COVID pandemic, another 750 billions, 750,000 million euros, which will be in large scale allocated to the countries and managed directly by the countries. And altogether, this allows the European Union to this big magical figure of 1.8 trillion of funding for the coming years to support recovery from the COVID pandemic and the European normal long-term priorities in the different policy areas. Most of these programs, the big lines have been approved. Now the sectorial European funding programs are expected to be adopted in early 2021, and then will apply retroactively from the beginning of 2021. So they will start January 2021. Even in some of them, they will be adopted later on. Okay. So this is how the funds look like in a single picture. So we have this total budget of 1,824 billion euros. The largest part of this, which is now highlighted in this magenta, is this multi-annual financial framework, 1,000 billion euros. And then we have, this is the figure, so that we have here, and then we have for the next generation, highlighted in red, the 700 billions. And then we have, if the circle represents the 1.8 trillion or the 1,800 billion, we have represented the different main programs in which these are the main policy areas in which this funding will be divided. In blue, so when we have the money that will be allocated to single market, innovation, and digital activities. This comes mostly from the multi-annual financial framework, and in here we are talking 143 billion euros. The largest share goes to research and innovation, and from here comes the Horizon Europe program, takes the biggest bulk from this budget, but there is also a budget for the single market, for space activities, and for European strategic investments. So from here, we'll be looking in particularly at Horizon Europe, which takes most of this budget. Then the second component and the largest one, so from the 1.8 trillion, 1 trillion, almost 1.1 goes to cohesion, resilience, and values. This includes the regional development and cohesion, so from where the Interregs and the urban innovative actions and Urbact as well comes from. which has roughly 290 billion euros for this period. There is 115 for investing in people, social cohesion and values. And then there is 693 that is from the recovery and resilience, which will then be allocated to the different countries as a cohesion and resilience instrument to be adopted by the countries and then broken down in different programs, which are now being, in Portugal, they are being now discussed at national level before being officially presented to the European Commission for approval and then starting to be implemented. So this is what in Portugal started to be called the bazooka, as a big weapon in order to try to help recover the country from the effects of the pandemic. Now it's being called as a vitamin by our Prime Minister, which also has now the presidency of the European Union. So there is a lot of discussion in Portugal regarding how much of this will go to actually to companies, to the market, how much will stay in the public sector. I think this is the case in Portugal. I think it will be the case in most countries. At least a big part of this will stay in the public sector, and then in cities, public, local authorities, municipalities can be one of the main beneficiaries from this instrument. I think that is pretty sure. I think we can take that for granted right now. I think it's worthwhile when we look at this and before looking at the other programs, because now we are talking a big part of this money in European terms. This will also go for the URBACT, for Interregs, for the urban innovative actions, and then there is always this distinction between objective 1 region, so the ones that are below 75% of the European GDP, gross the domestic product by head, the average in terms of NUTS2 region. And then there are the regions which are between 75 and 100, and then the more developed regions which are above 100. So this is the latest eligibility map, the one that is valid for this period, 2021-2027. So in red as objective 1, so eligible for further support for instance, in Interreg or in URBACT for higher co-funding taxes. We can see most of Portugal, with the exception of Lisbon and Algarve, the south of Spain, the south of Italy, and still most of Central Europe, with the exception of the capital regions in most of the countries. Even if, for instance, Czech Republic, we can see it's mostly orange more than red, so it starts to be a development in these countries. Also the Baltics, we can see that while Lithuania is still red, but the other are in orange by now. Latvia, right, is red. Okay, so continue with the programs. The third component, which is also the second biggest in terms of size, this goes for natural resources and environment. So a big share of this goes to the agro policy, 350 billion euros. And then there are another 22.8 that goes to environment and climate action as well. And most of this comes from the multi-annual framework program from the MFF, but a small share from the next generation, so from the recover plan, will also be allocated to this natural resources and environment and should be used for this. We can see in the big picture in the left that from the big number, the 1.8, there are some guidelines regarding climate and digital mainstreaming. Climate action should be 30% of spending across all programs, so that's an horizontal guideline, and digital, it's a priority in all programs, and it should take 20% of the recovery and resilience facility. So the next generation EU, so 20% should go for digital action as well, which could be relevant in the case of our project for digital transition for city cards. Then next, we have this series of smaller programs which are less relevant for what we want to do. We have around 22 billion euros that go to migration and border management. We have 13.2 billion euros that go to security and defense. We have 98.4, still a considerable budget, that goes to neighborhood policy, including 85 billion euros for external action for Europaid, for instance, and for assistance to other countries, and 12 billion that go to pre-accession assistance to candidate countries. And then we have 73.1 that goes to European public administration. So this is the big figures that they are public now, and this is a breakdown of the figures as we can see them. When we break down these figures in programs, looking at the figures from the multi-annual financial framework, so the 1 trillion euros or the 1,000 billion euros, we can see that this is more or less divided in 3 equal parts. 1/3 goes to cohesion policy, this from the MMF, about 200 billion euros for the Regional Development Fund, for the ERDF, 88 billion euros for ESF, for the European Social Fund, and 42 billion euros for the Cohesion Fund. Then we have another third of this that goes to the Common Agriculture Policy. This was always one of the biggest budgets of the European Union. It still is. So 1/3 of the MFF alone goes to Common Agriculture Policy. And then the final third goes to these new and reinforced priorities, where we have Horizon Europe with 76 billion euros. We have 70 euros for Neighborhood Development International Cooperation Instrument, and then we have a multitude of smaller programs like the Just Transition Fund, 7.5 billion euros, LIFE program, 4.8, Erasmus Plus, 21.7, Creative Europe, 1.6, Digital Europe program, 6.8. The ones between Erasmus Plus, LIFE, Digital Europe that could eventually be more relevant for the kind of activities that we are doing and discussing inside CAD for All. As regards the next generation, the breakdown, so the biggest share, almost the big majority goes to this Recovery and Resilience Facility, 672 billions. Then there is 47.5 for this REACT EU, which are that can be taken at the European level, and then 10 billion euros for the Just Transition Fund, 7.5 for the European Agriculture Fund for Rural Development, 5 billion euros from this will be invested into Horizon Europe, and this is how the budgets are broken down. Just to finalize this introduction part, so if we look at the trends, this total budget, the EU budget, as a percentage of the gross national income of all countries together, has been relatively stable around 1.2, 1.1%. That's still what it represents, so we are more or less in the same level. That's the percentage of the gross national income that countries altogether are putting in the EU budget. And in the graphic to the right, if we look at the evolution of the different main areas, we can see that the Common Agriculture Policy and Fisheries, it's still one of the most important, but it's in the late 80s, beginning of the 90s, it represented 55% of the total European Union budget. Now it's 30%. So it's of the MFF, so it's considerably less. Other programs, including Horizon, now has been growing steadily and now represents the biggest share. And economic, social, and territorial cohesion, which started around 20%, it's also grown to 30%. So now we have these three more or less in the same level. Okay, any question so far? Everything all right in terms of the big figures? Yes, so then we can move into the second point. And this is the big envelope now that we have in front of us. Let me just try to minimize this so I can see, okay. And now going back here, okay. So regarding how cities, municipalities, like the partners in CARD for All, how they should position themselves regarding this new envelope. So it's a lot of money when we look at the big figures, then starts to be broken down into programs which are still a lot of money. So 76 billion euros for Horizon Europe, it's still a lot of money. It's below the initial proposal from the Commission, which was for 100 billion, but it's still considerable lot of money. It's more than what it used to be in programs before, but rules have also changed. It's not in the same way that partners, organizations, cities can capture a part of this money as they used to do. So that a new positioning is required regarding this new EU funding landscape. And I would say that the biggest trend that we've been noticing, and this may change now with the next generation, how it's going to be implemented in the countries. But if we look at Horizon, if we look at Erasmus+, LIFE, Urban Innovative Actions, I think we've been witnessing a move from harder investments into infrastructure towards more and more softer skills. This is from Dan Pink, which is a thinker and a writer about innovations from one of his latest books. And he says that back in the 18th century, we had an agricultural age, and then most of the investments were on land for agriculture. 20th century, we've seen the Industrial Revolution and the start of industrialization of Europe. And then investments were and the wealth could be found on the owners of industries. And throughout most of the 20th century, most of the support, public support, was still towards this industrial age and towards capturing industries and creating industry employments for the regions, for the cities. So a lot of investment was in infrastructure related to industrial parks, related to roads and housing and infrastructure that could capture these blue-collar workers and industrial workers for the cities and the regions. Later in the 20th century, we have the information age, and we started to see a growth, but still a lot of investment in infrastructure for incubators, for knowledge centers, for universities, for research centers. So this was the information age. But now he says in the 21st century, so we've come to a time where information, the wealth, the richness, the value is no longer in the information. We cannot say. We still hear a lot of people saying we are living in information age, but according to Dan Pink and other thinkers, this is no longer true, because now information has become a common asset, as agro products before and as industrial products before. Once we had globalization and the cheaper products from China have become a cheaper asset, the same with information, which now can be found everywhere. And now we are living more a conceptual age, and it's more about creativity. And it's a rise of these soft skills of eye touch and eye concept. So this capacity to detect patterns, opportunities, combine different ideas together. And it's a lot about the package, how do you combine things, how you present them in a new way. And it's to this new conceptual age, which is more and more requested by funding programs, that cities must adapt. They must, in their projects, more than asking for funding for infrastructure, for developing a new incubator, for developing a new card, they must come with a more conceptual approach, and they must have a more holistic approach in terms of skills, quality of life, qualification of the people, behavior changes. So all this must be packaged and presented in a way that appeals to the public money and to whoever is managing public funding. And this is a trend, I think, that we've started noticing already a lot in Horizon 2020 and in other programs, but that we will see more and more now in this next programming period. If we take the example of Horizon and its ancestors that were before, I think we can say that in the beginning, when public money, European public funding started to be available for innovation, it was very much seen as a linear course. Innovation was a linear path between research and the product. It was from the research to the product. So you did research to try to arrive to a prototype. More than a final product, what was being funded was researching and arriving into a prototype. And this was the linear path. And this was what we've seen from most of Framework Program 1 until Framework Program 5, and other programs that started to emerge at the same time, was very much what they were looking for, and they were funding was this linear path from research to the product. In more recent times, I would say FP6, FP7, we started to witness a focus on moving one step further and involving already some early users into the project. So while in FP1, FP5, most of the projects were academic, no, it was universities, research centers, maybe some industrial organizations just arriving to a product. FP6, FP7, I think that's when cities and regions started to be more involved also in research projects as early adopters, so through the municipalities, through the hospitals, through other centers, other public centers start to be involved in the projects for the validation, the concepts that you couldn't finish just with the prototype, you had to validate it and start to appear in projects, and we move it one step further. H2020, I think, and Erasmus Plus and Urban Innovative Actions and others programs that appear at the same time have brought us one step even closer to the market. And I think for the first time, it was not a shame anymore in a proposal to H2020 to say that you really wanted to get to the market and to make sales and to get to clients and to involve final clients. And this started to be seen as a plus and not as a negative thing when you were still looking for pre-competitive proposals. So finally, I think in H2020, we dropped the management of programs, dropped this pre-competitive notion and started to ask it for competitive projects that could really make the difference into the market. And I think that now it's recognizable that innovation is in fact a process from the market to the market. It's not research to the product or even research to the first users. It's starting at the market and ending in the market. And then what Horizon Europe, but also the programs that we will see under Digital Europe and the Urban Innovative Actions and others, what they will want to see is the full cycle of moving from the market, understanding what the market wants, what are the needs of the people, involving people in this definition of needs, involving the final users, the citizens, the customers, the clients, and then influencing this research, which will then develop prototypes that should be validated through pilots, small scale, large scale pilots, whatever, and then finally brought back to the people and to the market. So I think that this is the concept that the programs now under this new programming line are asking for, and this is what we need to adapt to. So we are no longer developing prototypes, we are no longer just doing pilots. We need to bring to all the projects that we do this market-to-market concept. So it needs to start in the market and end in the market. In the end, it's like doing a 4 times 100 meter relay. And I think it always was like this, but for a long time, Europe in general and European programs were trying to do this innovation run, which in fact is a 4 times 100 meters relay with one professional runner, when someone like we did in Portugal, someone from Jamaica, from Nigeria that becomes Portuguese and is a very fast runner in the first leg, in the first 100 meters, research to the product, but then with, amateurs doing the last 3 legs and then finding the results disappointing. And now we understand that if we really want to achieve results, we need to have 4 professional runners, if you want to compete with the United States or Jamaica in metaphorical terms, but with the United States and other China and other nations which are strong in innovation, we need really to have 4 professional runners. So we need to be as professional in co-creating and influencing research from market to research, then as in research to the product to validation, and validation to the market. I think these are the lessons. Yes, please. Laura.
Yes, it's Laura. No, just one comment that just to mention that in these new programs, in the Horizon Europe, Digital Europe, and even in the Horizon 2020, just to say that the local public administrations, they can have an important role as living labs are a space for demonstration, as piloting, because at the beginning, for example, I don't know, I suppose also in other cities, but in our case, in the city of Gijón, we saw the framework programs, the previous one, like high level only for research institutions, for university. But nowadays, as you told, it's very important the applicability of those projects in real context, and we can offer our space of cities as labs for testing different technologies.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Let me maximize this again. Absolutely, and that takes me to the next slide. I think what we'll see now is really a focus on co-creation, and we need this strong stakeholder engagement. And there, we may call it different things. We may call it large-scale pilots. We may call it living labs. Now, it's very trendy to call it sandboxes as well. We'll be witnessing a little bit of all this. But what this means is that involving the people and co-creating. So when we had before, in terms of public service policy, where it was starting from targets, taking decisions, designing, delivering, and then evaluating or not, a lot of times really not evaluating the impact of these policies. I think now in this more open market-to-market concept of innovation, so everything has to be co-participated. So it's a co-concept together with stakeholders, co-decisions, co-design, co-delivery, and then co-use, and everything. If people are participating, they are evaluating, and they are more demanding. And cities are in fact in an exceptional position for that because they have the channels. A city is a natural living lab. It's a natural sandbox. It's one of the best ways to experiment things. If you want to involve citizens, stakeholders, clients for a certain product, the best way to do it is within a city. And, specifically going to Card for All, the cards are a way of having a permanent link, a permanent channel with the citizens. And then they can be a mean, they can be the purpose of a project, but they can also be just a tool, because if you're using the cards, you have a living lab. If you have citizens that are using a card, you have a living lab or a sandbox or whatever you want to call it that you can use using this co-creation, co-evaluation process for whatever kind of development is needed. So that's, in fact, I think cities are more and more, it was very rare to see cities participating in FP7, FP6, almost nothing, FP7 it was rare. H2020, we've seen a major increase of participation of cities. We have a lot of programs specifically for cities, but we see cities participating in different types of projects in all areas. Because if we take this full cycle, the 4 times 100 meters that I've shown before, we need to validate, we need to bring in people, we need to co-create, and for that we need to have access to the people, and cities are the best partner to provide the access to the people. So cities will always have a role in most, I would say, horizontally across most of the programs, most of Horizon Europe, clearly in urban innovative actions and others, that those are specifically for cities. But speaking of Horizon Europe, I think most of the projects in every area, except those very specifically, will benefit from having a city, and will benefit from having a city with a channel to access the citizens. And that can be a city card. There are other means, but the city card is a tool. I think it's a passport. It's a COVID vaccination insurance that opens the doors to participate in most of Horizon Europe projects. And these projects can then help you to refine your tool. So the project may not be about the city card, but it may use the city card as a living lab or as a sandbox tool. These are the main urban challenges for cities. These are the ones, for instance, that are adopted as topics for urban innovative actions. These are the ones that you see in most URBAC projects. These are the ones that you will see in Horizon Europe as well. Digital transition, for sure, and city cards can be included in here, but also energy transition, urban mobility, public procurement, jobs and skills, sustainable use of land, climate change, circular economy, and then inclusion of migrants, air quality, housing, urban poverty. So all these topics will be recurrent, will be appearing in most of these programs. In the MFF, in Horizon Europe, in Interreg, in urban innovative actions, but I expect also in the Next Generation EU, once the program gets to the countries, is broken down into national programs, in the end, it will be about this. It will be about jobs and skills, and cities need to be involved. It will be about digital transition. It will be about mobility, energy, climate change. In all these are urban challenges, and these are the main challenges for Europe, and so cities will be involved in most of this. In terms of the main technological trends, I would say 3 major trends that we expect to see: open data and Internet of Things. Big cities, these are the basics. These are the basic infrastructure for a smart city. So you need to have open data, you need to have Internet of Things in order to collect information. We've seen this movement starting in big cities, in Barcelona, in Amsterdam, in London, Vienna. But I think even smaller cities can make a lot of progress. And you see more and more examples of smaller cities which are achieving extraordinary things in these areas. I think if we see recommendations in this, start small and then scale incrementally. Start with a small area, start with a small experiment. In Urbact now, and I'm the lead expert for a project called IoT Exchange, so it's really in these areas. And now we are using the small scale actions for the first time. It's now possible for the first time under Urbact for the more recent APNs for the thematic networks. And we are going to start these very small experiments in our network. So each of the 8 partners, it's 10,000 euros to do something very small in terms of adoption of sensors for a specific solution, for sewage, for water monitoring, for floods. And then it will grow. If it's proven successful, it will go into the integrated action plan. Some budget will be put aside and it will be made bigger. I think this is a good recommendation in general, and Urbact, it's a good example of how you can start small, and then if someone works, you can scale it up under some of the programs that we'll see immediately afterwards. Of course, you need to build the right partnerships for the journey. Cities cannot do it alone. When we start moving to these technological areas, they need technological partners, research centers, maybe universities if they have them, but startups and companies for sure. Leverage your agility. Establish the right culture for continuous innovation. Cities need more than just open data, for sure. You know, they also need other kind of infrastructure, and they also need private data. But they should embrace open standards, open platforms, and then try to think global and act local. I think general recommendations, but will help you to define your policies regarding open data and IoT. The second trend, Industry 4.0. This will reshape the manufacturing world. It's often in the outskirts, sometimes within the cities, sometimes in the outskirts of cities. Some cities have grown up and become a city because, you know, they had a large industry. Then there was, you know, like we said, then we had the information age. Now we have the conceptual age, but industry is still there to stay. It needs to be involved in a bigger package. Like we said, it needs to be more conceptual. Less and less, I think we will see major investments for creating an industrial area, for supporting factories. But if we involve them, and Industry 4.0 is a package, it's a concept. So it's industry in the conceptual age. I think that's what Industry 4.0 is about. And I think cities, as long as they have some level of industrialization, they must define their own concept in order to be prepared for the next package of funds, because a lot of it will be around this concept. So they need to formulate their own Industry 4.0 strategies. For that, they need to start clustering companies, sustainable partnerships. They need to plan how they're going to achieve sustainability, social responsibility, ensure, even if it's about big industries, ensure the effective engagement of SMEs and startups. Again, ensure that they have open standards as a facilitator for open innovation, for collaboration. And then don't forget that they will need to look at skills, qualifications, competencies, that they will need to be upgraded, because it's very different to work in Industry 2.0 or 3.0, which was a blue-collar job, and to work in Industry 4.0, where you need to be a digital-minded person. And then there is a role for cities to play in here. And the final trend, I will say, it's mobility. based on digital technology, which brings new services, new social innovations, new business models. So this includes vehicles like electrical vehicles, services, infrastructure. And again, we will see a lot of support either from national funds, from Next Generation, managed by national authorities, from European funds, from Horizon, from LIFE, from Urban Innovative Actions. We will see a lot of funds going into mobility. This implies a good diagnosis of the problems and city analysis, integrated strategies for urban mobility, development of cost-effective solutions, and then an assumption of what are the 4 important roles of cities: regulation, infrastructure, financing, and then protection of privacy and security. This is what the cities must ensure in terms of mobility. So to conclude with the positioning, and then we see if we have further questions. I think the main trends, if cities want to be ready for the next package of fund, they must start to think of their strategies. They should think about ambitious but feasible, actionable strategies that they can put together in the short term, because I think from now we are talking short term. The first calls from Horizon Europe will be there around the corner. Urban Innovative Actions end of this year, as we will see. So it's all very short term. So cities must be ready to implement their actions in the short term. These strategies should be co-created with the city's local community. And I think being in Urbact is a good thing for that, because Urbact was one of the first programs to be concerned about co-creation when co-creation was still not a concept, but the local stakeholders groups, so the LSG, the Urbact stakeholders groups, it's co-creation. In fact, it's bringing in the stakeholders to co-design the integrated action plan. So Urbact, this must be said, was doing co-creation before co-creation became fashionable. And cities that are in Urbact are used to this. So I think they can build on what they've been doing in Urbact projects, in the local support groups, to co-create these strategies for more ambitious goals, for more ambitious programs. Apply this holistic approach to strategy design. It's about the concept now, as we've seen. So it's not about isolated investments. It's not about doing a bike, just doing a bike lane. It's really about this holistic strategy, becoming enablers of transformation of the local entrepreneurial activity, SMEs, startups. So the city authorities must become the champion for this entrepreneurial ecosystem and help them to participate in Industry 4.0, in the mobility, in digital transition in general. And then they, I think, and this is also important, and it's common to our Urbact participants, they must be activated by a sense of belonging to a European network of cities. So it's always easier to do it if you're part of a network, even if it is a urban innovative action that you do on your own. But it's always important that you say that you're part of a network, that you are used to European collaboration, that you link to some benchmarks, that you say that you learn from the experience of others, that others have been involved in this effort. Any question? So far, I've been putting a lot of in. When I start talking, it's difficult to stop me. Yeah? Now, as you probably noticed by now. So if you have any question, like I said, it's difficult for me to follow the raised hands, but just unmute yourself, put in a question, and intervene.
And also you can use the chat room and make questions that later on we can reply. Okay.
Miguel, if you could keep an eye in the chat room, again, it's a bit difficult for me. And then if you see a hot question, just you can intervene and you can put it on behalf of the person that placed it, okay?
Okay, sure.
Okay, so let's move forward then. Before moving to the programs itself, so specifically in terms of city car developments, I think this is an example of an integrated approach. And if we are specifically working on smart cards, I think we are not going to find under urban innovative actions, under Horizon Europe, whatever, we are not going to find a specific call for development of a smart card. Now we're going to find for smart cities, for smart mobility, for citizen behavior. And then we must integrate stakeholders, all different stakeholders, business, SMEs, startups, civil servants. We must address a lot of smart services that we can address through the card, mobility, buildings, health, education, tourism, like most of you have been doing in Card for All. You must address the next generation infrastructure, and you must address the enabling levers like open data, like governance, innovation, skills, these kinds of things. So, and this is the kind of holistic approach. If you want to develop a smart card, you cannot look for a project that is going to fund your smart card development. You have to look for a project that is going to help you develop next generation infrastructure and services, and that involve a large number of stakeholders around one of those topics that we have seen. And this you are going to find most likely in one of these programs. If you're looking at European level, it can be Urban Innovative Actions, it can be Horizon Europe, it can be Interreg. Those will be the first three options. If you'd ask me, how can I fund cooperation with other cities for developing this integrated approach around smart cards, I will say one of these three. There are a few others that we'll also address. And then there is, of course, national programs, the ones that come from cohesion funds, the one that will come from next generation. That will be different from country to country. I think it's we cannot address them all, but it's the same. I think the same kind of approach, positioning will be required for them as for the European projects. Let's first have a look at Urban Innovative Actions, or as they are called, the Urban Lab of Europe. So looking at the first phase of the program, which is ending now. So we had the total budget of 372 million euros. This allowed a funding per project for a single city with a local partnership, a funding of up to 5 million euros at a funding rate maximum 80%. So we were talking maximum projects of 6 million euros of budget, funded 5 million euros from Urban Innovative Actions. So 20% partners' contributions, which could be public money, could be in kind, so from staff costs, own resources, so like the normal, like in Eurobact or any other program. 3 years for implementation, plus 1 for follow-up, and payment terms in line with European programs, 50% already as an advance on the signature of the contract, which I would say, compared with most of the national programs, it's quite generous. So we are talking about a reasonable size, 5 million euros of funding just for a city. I think for a large-scale pilot of some innovation, we are talking about large-scale projects, allows you to do a lot of things. There were 5 calls in the first program, about roughly more or less 1 per year, 1 after the start of the program. And now the next call for proposals, already under this next envelope, it's announced for the end of the current year, end of 2021, maybe beginning of 2022. So before that, I think that on the last trimester, they should be announcing the topics, announcing the call, providing more information, and then the call should end, I would say, probably beginning of 2022. But that's around the corner, as we have seen. I've been involved in 3 evaluations. So of the 5 calls, I've been involved in 3 for Urban Innovative Actions. In the first one, I was an evaluator. And then in the next 2, I was a topic coordinator, once for jobs and skills, and in the last one for digital transformation. So I've seen a lot of proposals and what they ask for and what they expect to see as Urban Innovative Actions. What they expect to see, it's projects that are related to sustainable urban development, that are relevant at European level, and they support the thematic objectives and investment priorities of the Regional Development Fund. So this in general, because they are funded from the European Regional Development Fund, it's a European program, and of course it's on sustainable urban development. And then in more specific characteristics, what they expect is innovative projects, and that we'll go to it, it's the most important. They really want to see, they call themselves the Urban Lab of Europe, so they see as a lab for innovative things that haven't been tested before. This should be built and delivered in a local partnership. It may include external partners, but it's a local partnership, measurable results, which are transferable to other cities and regions in Europe, and with a good quality implementation plan. The big focus is on innovation, and the definition that the program has agreed is that they're looking for products, services, and processes that can bring value to a certain policy field and never been tested before in Europe. Now, there is always, when we go to an evaluation for UIA, there is always a lot on discussion of this, and they start with this big sentence and then they give a more pragmatic approach. It's very difficult to get proposals for things that are absolutely new and they have never been tested. So maybe they haven't been tested in a particular context, maybe they have been tested in a particular scale. So then they go further and they say, okay, we are looking for two kinds of things, either revolutionary, so really something out of the box, never been tested before, but we know that it's difficult to see a lot of this coming forward. You don't have revolutionary ideas every day, or evolutionary, which builds on traditional elements but presents them in a different way, changes the scale, tests traditional approaches but with different people, something that was tested in a particular segment of population, now we're going to test it in another one. That's innovative enough. And I think the projects that have been approved have been able to show some level of evolutionary innovation. I will tell you from all in the free, I was in free, like I said, call for proposals in a topic. Normally they have 4 or 5 topics per call. So I've seen, I would say, 1/5 of all the proposals, because both jobs and skills and digital transition were the ones with more proposals. So maybe I've seen 1/5 of all the proposals that were submitted and approved, and I haven't seen anyone that I would say was revolutionary. So I've seen some innovative approaches, and then I've seen some very well presented approaches. And I think in the end, that's what we expect to see. But this is the biggest focus, and this is what will decide if a proposal is considered to be innovative or not. It's what is going to decide if it's going to be funded or not. Then the second focus is on partnership. The proposal must have delivery partners, so it's a consortium. It's like in a European project or a national project, you are expected to have a consortium led by the municipality, by the local authority, but with university, companies, associations, whatever partners you need to develop. And then you are also expected, and these get a budget, like in a consortium collaborative project, they get budget, they get to ensure their own co-financing, they are funded 80% as well. And they have to ensure that 20% they get funding for their activities. And then you should also demonstrate that you are able to involve a wider group of stakeholders, a little bit like the local stakeholder group in Urbact, but at a larger scale. So they don't have any budget, they are not partners, but they should be involved. So you have to show that you are able to involve more organizations than the ones that you have on partners. And then you need to demonstrate that you are able to measure your results. I think there is clearly a learning curve, I would say, for all European programs, but for urban innovative actions for sure. The first projects from the first call are now coming to an end. And now it's where they need to demonstrate what they have achieved, what they are measured. And one thing is what you say in the proposal, how you measure. The other thing, how you really measure. And I think there is a learning curve also for UIA, for urban innovative actions, and they may become more demanding in the next stage. But clearly you have to demonstrate that you're able to measure whatever results and innovation you hope to achieve. In terms of the partnerships, so this is the partnership. The lead partner should be the main urban authority. It may involve other urban authorities, either to comply with eligibility criteria or because it makes sense, so there may be other urban authorities involved. For instance, a city may involve a regional authority, which could also be considered as a kind of urban authority, or may involve a lower level urban authority. So the city council may involve a smaller district administration, things like this. And then you have a number of delivery partners from different sectors. In terms of which urban authorities can apply, any eligible local administrative unit, so it must be elected municipality, a district, as according to Eurostat. Eligible organized agglomerations, we will see which ones are eligible or not. So some, like in France, the metropole areas or metropolitan areas, the CIMs, the intermunicipal communities in Portugal, they are eligible. Or different urban authorities, 3 municipalities may wish to join together and apply. One must be the leader, the other 2 are partners, and they all must comply with the criteria of population. So they must have more than 50,000 inhabitants. They must be a local administrative unit as defined in the Eurostat. They must have a population above 50,000 and a degree of urbanization. So more than half of this population must live in what is considered to be a urban area. It must be considered under this DGURB, degree of urbanization, which is provided by Eurostat as a city, as a urban area. So there is always problems, and there are always in every call in UIA proposals that are considered ineligible because it's a municipality that has over 50,000 inhabitants, but not in urban areas. So not the majority of these do not live in areas which are considered as a city or a town. And this is a very strict eligibility criteria. And if 2 cities group together to apply, the 2 together must have more than 50,000, but each of them must be considered as a city. So for each of them, more than half of the population must live in an urban area. And this, again, is always a case for problems. In terms of organized agglomerations, there is someone in the lobby. Miguel, can you let them in? Okay. Okay, so in terms of organized agglomeration, so we see the ones that are eligible, like I said, metropolitan areas, intermunicipal associations, combined areas in the UK, European groupings of territorial cooperation that are composed by municipalities are eligible. National associations of cities, regional parks, provinces, regions, counties, leader regions, tourism districts, these are not eligible. So if there is a tourist area for the north of Portugal or for Porto, this is not eligible. A national association of cities is also not eligible. Now, it has to be a local urban area. In terms of trends from the approved projects, so approved projects have had very different partnerships ranging from 4, as little as 4 partners to 17. So there is really not a rule how many partners you should have. Different trends according to the topics and to the countries. We've seen very high range of delivery partners, but I will say that 90% of the projects include either a university or a research institute as a partner, includes some representative from the private sector, often NGOs to try to represent the citizens, for instance, certain sectors, infrastructure and public service providers, water facilities, electricity facilities if you're dealing with energy, sectoral agencies, and often also local, regional, or even national authorities are often participants in UIA. I'll give you an example of a project which I think is the one, I think it's closer to what you're doing under Card for All. This was approved in digital transition, so in the fourth call for proposals, the first one that had digital transition. I was a topic coordinator for this. It came from Irlin. It's not a big city, so it's a city of 88,000. So for UIA standards, we have projects from Madrid, we have projects from Amsterdam, from Vienna, from Lisbon. So we have more often than not large cities. So this was a small city. They didn't go for the maximum. They asked it for half of the possible funding, so 2.6. And the challenge that they presented was, the main challenge was the declining population, which then put a pressure on a lot of sectors. First of all, the maintenance of public spaces, because they had less and less resources. Then a population which is not used to be involved in local policy making or civic involvement. And then a very high vacancy rates in retail, so a lot of unoccupied commercial spaces, and it was necessary to keep the commercial zones attractive for inhabitants and visitors. So this was the problem, and the solution was not exactly a card, but a digital platform using blockchain. Blockchain was now it's getting more common, but it was very trendy in 2 years or 3 years ago when the proposal was evaluated. And it was a platform for calling citizens to perform tasks for the municipality and applying a rewarding system. So 3 main features: a mobile application for citizens so that they could find tasks to be due and commit to a task, a web application for entrepreneurs. In this case, they will be paid, and the municipal dashboard in order to upload and control the tasks. So citizens were asked to comply with some tasks. They will get a reward as some bonus points that they could use for some municipal services. There was also a possibility for entrepreneurs, which in this case could be paid. They could propose tasks in order to be done also by citizens, and then a dashboard for the city to control all this. So they didn't call it a city card, but the platform could be represented by a card to be given to each city. So as you can see, it's not very different from, and the rewarding, this is something that we discussed, I remember, in some of the meetings that we had. So not so different from what some of you are doing. The partnership, the municipality as the leader, they had this SME Q-Town, which was developing part of the solution. They had the Statistics Bureau from the Netherlands, the National Public Authority as a partner, Brightland Smart Services Campus, so a business support organization, a NGO, City Center Organization, another NGO for involving citizens, and then a sectoral agency, the Association of Netherlands Municipalities, which gave them extra points for transferability into other regions in the Netherlands, and then eventually to other countries. Expected results: bigger citizen involvement and participation, bigger sense of belonging to the city, getting to feel more involved, appreciating their own environment, also increase in turnover of retailers, adding to a new economic dynamism to the municipality of Berlin. So, not more than what could have been proposed back then by Rijon or by Aveiro. Aveiro has their own project, their own urban innovative action, but what Rijon has been doing in the city card, I think it's not less innovative than what IRIN has proposed in here, and they got this funding of 2.6 million for this. Some hints from my participation in the evaluation. Not the case of Berlin, which is a relatively small city, so a little bit just above the minimum eligibility, but quite often the size matters, so it's easier for a bigger city to get a UIA approved than for a smaller city. That's a fact. The evaluation, 80% of the evaluation is done by external experts like me, and that's a lot, but there is 20% which is done by the European Commission and then by the Urban Innovative Secretariat. And at least in one case, I have seen that changing the ranking quite considerable. So, and there is some room for political lobbying, like in most of the programs, but at least for the 20% of the evaluation, the right political lobbying in the right directorates or units of the European Commission can make some difference. If you want a proposal approved, I think the most important thing is that it needs to appear innovative. Being pragmatic, it doesn't need to be innovative, but the concept needs to appear innovative. If you are able to come with a radical approach, even if then the implementation is very pragmatic, but the more radical the package, so again, we come to this, it's a conceptual age, like I told you, and the more innovative the package is, the better. Then if the components are traditional, no, it doesn't really matter. For most of the proposals that I've seen, I would say that at least half were very poor quality. So there is half of the proposals you've seen in UIA, immediately you put aside as poor quality, poor effort. So if you have a well-written proposal, immediately you are in the first half. Immediately you have half of the competition is left behind. And then if you have a very well-written proposal prepared by professionals, very quality, if someone is able to present the package in an innovative way, I think even a traditional idea in the end can make the difference. Miguel has been involved as an expert in the proposal from the project from Milan. I was involved in the evaluation, very well-written proposal. I think Miguel will tell you that it's not a major innovative project. No, I don't think he has seen a lot of innovative things taking place, but it was very well presented, very well written. It was on the agro-food sector at the time where Milan was having the World Exhibit on agro and on food, so good timing. They took advantage of the circumstances, so all this counts. But I think there is room for smaller, as long as they are eligible, and big cities. It will always be more difficult for smaller than for big cities, but a small city with a well-thought concept, even if not absolutely innovative, but well presented, well wrapped in a nice concept with a professional proposal, can have a very good chance. We have the experience of Aveiro, partner of Card for All. They had a very, very well presented proposal with an innovative concept on developing STEAM, so new qualifications for the new digital age. So not only science, technology, engineering, and maths, but combining with the creativity, with the arts and creativity qualifications. And it was successful, and it was evaluated as one of the best. Questions on the UIAs, on the Urban Innovative Actions? Too much information? Too little? Miguel, can you maybe just your experience from Milan, just from being the lead expert from UIA, what can you add to what I've said?
I think that in the end it was a sum of activities, running activities in Milano that compiled in a very, I would say, marketing way. It gets the funding from the UIA program. But it's a good example that when we build the right package and communicate in the right way the package using the tools available on the program, making a good application, but also during implementation, communicating well what the transformation that the project is doing in the city, this is a successful UIA project. But if you ask me if I found disruptive activities in the project, I didn't found. It was some common activities developed in not an integrated way. And the most innovative aspect of the project was the integration of different activities in one single concept. And based on this, in the end, it was a successful project, well evaluated by the UIA program, and in my opinion, a good example of what can be a competitive approach to the UIA proposals.
Yeah. And Laura, I just presented just a very brief slide, very few information on IRLIN, but as far as I remember, that proposal from IRLIN was the best evaluated one in the digital transition topic in that call for proposals. And it's from what you have seen, and I know it was only an overview, it's not much more than what you've been doing with the card in Rivon, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you explain the project, everything came to me. But I have to say that, I mean, just a comment to other cities, that Gijón tried twice to apply for urban innovative actions, and we failed both. And I think the point was because, I mean, I have to be honest to say that we had very good ideas. One was related to circular economy, linked to schools, also linked to raise awareness with building and transformation of using new energies. I mean, it was really a complete project, also involving regional stakeholders, also taking into account employment of people at risk of exclusion, children. I mean, it was really a community project, but we failed. And I think our problem was that we did, I mean, not we care about the writing of the project, but it was done by ourselves with our own resources. So sometimes we are busy with other tasks, and we couldn't dedicate time by writing. And the problem, as you mentioned before, it was that maybe we were not able to transmit the essence of the project. So I think it's worth with this big scale project to count with help, with a company that help you in putting all the things together and finding this innovative twist. But it's really, I think, a citizen car approach. It fits perfectly in a urban innovative action. And something similar to a card, but it was more linked to the social rent. It was all the data related to the social status of the different citizens were in this card, and it was kind of a subsidy managed through a citizen card. So I think there is room for citizen car models in this kind of projects.
Yeah. No, I fully agree with that. But like you say, and in UIA, you see that also unlike Horizon Europe, UIA has a very strict template for proposals. You don't have a lot of space to present it. So you really need to be very focused and present it very well. And you have to tell a story. You know, it's not just the idea. You really have to tell a nice story. And it must be done by professional people that knows how to pick up an idea and turn it into a nice concept and tell a nice story. And in the end, you have a few pages, 4 or 5. It's not much more in the end. The final proposal is very big, but the part where you can tell the story, the part that the evaluators really read is very short, and you need to make the difference. I will tell you a joke about that, a joke which is a real story. I was also an evaluator in the first call for proposals of the European Institute of Technology. They had the first round evaluation, then they had a second group of 7 evaluators. I was one of them that was doing this final evaluation of the first call for the KICs, so the knowledge and innovation communities. And this was 100 million euros project. So the funding for that call for each project, they were approving 4. 1 in each topic, was 100 million euros. So there was an evaluation, we selected the projects, and then at the end in Budapest, they did a final meeting with the evaluators and asked them for what they thought of the evaluation process. And the first evaluator, I was at the end of the table, the first evaluator starts, yes, the process was good, but it was too complex, proposals were too big, they should be made simpler, you should ask for 50 pages. And then the next say, no, not 50 pages, you should ask for 20 pages. They really must be. And then the next one said, no, not 20 pages, you should ask for 10 pages. And then it came to me and I said, listen, guys, if we go this way, if you're going to give 100 million euros on 5 pages, I'm going to hire a Nobel Prize winner. I'm going to give him 5 million euros to write me 5 wonderful pages about this idea, and then I'm going to get 100 million euros. So there is a limit, but this is the trend, I was alone in this opinion because everybody said less. So if you are giving 100 million or 5 million euros as UIA on 5 pages, in the end that's what it is, because I will tell you, because I was there as an evaluator, all evaluators make their opinion on those 5 pages, so it's part C, criteria C1, C2, innovativeness. They have to be exceptionally well written, exceptionally well written. You must be a professional writer, someone that is used to write novels or someone like that, or that level. That's what's going to make the difference. So that's how it is. And we're talking big money, so it's a big game. And if we move into Horizon Europe, it's not exactly the same. I think ideas can play a major role in here, but we're also seeing this trend, less number of pages, 70 pages, 50 pages for some proposals. And what we used to say to our clients that work in Horizon Europe is the first 2 pages, especially the first one, must be exceptional. You must get the evaluators by the first page, because that's what's going to make the difference. That's, I would say, after the Urban Innovative Actions, which will be the most obvious program if you want to get a larger scale city car development approved. Horizon Europe, like I said in the beginning, will be the next one. Probably not for the city car development as such, but for the city car as a channel for a living lab of citizens in order to involve them in the development of a larger thing. This is what we know so far about Horizon Europe. More and more information is coming forward. I have to say, not in a totally transparent way. Some people get it first. There is this website called Science Direct, which has been publishing some of the draft work programs, and they call them the Horizon Europe papers, because they say this is our contribution to make things more transparent. But some of the guidelines we already know. There is more importance being given to the European Innovation Council. There is the research and innovation missions, which will have a structuring role throughout the Horizon Europe. There is further association possibilities, more and more focus on open science, communication, dissemination, new approach to partnerships, and spreading excellence, trying to encourage participation from those countries which are lagging behind. In terms of missions, I don't think this will be the most important part for cities. There are 5 mission areas. They will be programmed according to the global challenges. It will be developed as a portfolio of actions across different disciplines with a very broad goal in the end, and then this will be implemented through different projects. These are the 5 mission areas. There is one on climate neutral and smart cities. So we should expect to see this then being reflected in some specific calls or some calls in the Pillar 2. So it's something to keep under the eye to see what is going to appear in here, but we still don't have that much information on how this is going to be developed. European partnerships. Horizon Europe is promising to make them simpler, based on memorandum of understanding. So this will complement what is being doing with the joint technological initiatives. So there will be a joint program for certain areas, certain sectors with certain stakeholders. And then not all of the programs will be managed by the European Commission. They could be managed by these institutionalized European partnerships, which will be running their own small program and opening their own calls. There are 8 areas there, and I think clean, connected mobility could be the one that could be more relevant. And again, it will be important to keep an eye to see on how this is going to develop. But I think that if we look at our Horizon Europe structure, there is these 3 pillars, and clearly Pillar 2, which is the traditional collaborative projects, is the one that is going to be more relevant for cities' participation. So Pillar 1 is more for basic research, activities from the European Research Council, the Marie Curie actions, funding of research infrastructures. So there may be some involvement of cities here and there, but it's more for researchers. Pillar 3, Innovative Europe, is more for startups under the European Innovation Council. So it includes what used to be called the SME instrument. Again, there may be projects that will have an impact in urban systems. There may be projects for city cars, but always led more from the company side, from the entrepreneurial side, from startups, from SMEs. Pillar 2 is where we are going to see collaborative projects which will develop new solutions, new products, new services for certain areas in large consortia between 5, 6, 10, 20, 40. We see bigger and bigger consortium, and in which cities are expected to participate. The initial budget for this pillar was 52 billion. It's going to be a bit less now with the final 76 billion that were given to the Horizon Europe as a whole. It has these six main areas, of which climate, energy, mobility, and I think also partly culture, creativity, inclusive societies will have for sure specific calls for cities, for smart cities, and these were more opportunities for participation may come. The way that this will unfold, so we've come to the end of a legislative package, the strategic plan 21-24 for the first half of implementation, it's now known. The work programs for the different areas for the first 2 years, 2021, 2022, are now becoming published. Some as a draft, some as in a more final version, and then this will finally evolve into calls for proposals, which will ask for proposals for specific, very specific topics, which should address that topic and come up with a bottom-up proposal for something to do, but on those specific areas. There are no calls at the moment. We had the Green Deal, which was still under Age 2020, but they are starting to unfold. But once they will come out, you know, what we need to do, and I think everyone that has an interest in Age 2020 before and now in Horizon Europe should do this at least once a week, is to go to the participant portal. But if you just go to Google and you write calls for proposals, Age 2020 or Horizon Europe, from now on, immediately the first one that will appear, it's the participant portal site under EC Europa, in which all the calls for proposals are. So if you click there, you'll be taken here to this funding and tender opportunities, and then you can look, you can type for a certain area. If you just write cities, like in here, you have a lot of options, but if you just write cities and then you click on the search, it will take you to a page like this one. In this one, I had left all the free possibilities forthcoming, now open for submission or close. All the ones that appear, 115 are now closed. There are not open calls at the moment for cities. We are waiting, Green Deal is closed, and we are now waiting for the first calls from Horizon Europe. But quite soon as the first calls start to open, you can unclick the closed. They are not really relevant, and focus only on the ones that are open or forthcoming, and then you will see all the calls which may be relevant. In this case, the 115 calls that have been published over the last years, which were specifically mentioning cities on the title of the call for proposals. As I said, all closed, but this as an example, this was a call for cities as a platform for citizen-driven innovation. So it's a topic which could be relevant for what you are doing in the Card for All. It was a support action, coordination and support action. So not really an innovation action or a research and innovation action. So it was not meant to develop, but more to facilitate the infrastructure, the conditions. It's closed. It was closed on 2 years ago, on March 2018, but it's small, but you can see there it was for projects size of 1 million euros, and they were looking specifically for a consortium bringing together hubs, incubators, co-creation spaces. So not specifically cities, municipalities, but they could still participate, but more specifically incubators, co-creation centers linked to the city eventually, which will then capture and present successful innovative practice emerging in urban areas that absorb, develop, and create new knowledge and ideas that can affect citizens' behavior and improve the level of innovation from the people. So the City Card could be one of these tools which could be used as a good practice under this consortium. So eventually through participation of cities, through participation of innovation centers, incubators from the cities, from Rijon, from Aveiro, from Cesena, could be participating in this call for proposals.
Eurico, I have an example of Horizon 2020. No not of UEA, but in Horizon 2020 we were successful. And now we are partners of our research and innovation actions from the called DT transformation, and is with our citizen car. And the point is we are going to develop a pilot project using disruptive technologies to test if a citizen car is valid for voting in elections.
Yeah.
Maybe it's too ambitious for voting in elections, but at least to test it with a participatory budget. So it's just to check the security, all the things related to avoid fraud with blockchains. So we are going to test with a pilot if the citizen card can be a tool that we can use for voting. That is also really interesting in this time of COVID times where people
exactly
vote, or I mean for different purposes, but it's just an example to illustrate that the citizen card can be used, as you mentioned before, as a tool to test different approaches in the cities.
Exactly. It's exactly that. I think it's a brilliant tool when more and more calls need to move into validation. They need to have their living lab, their involve citizens, users, clients. The city card is a tool to ensure that involvement. So you won't find a lot of calls for proposals for developing city cards, but for developing secure means to ensure citizens' participation, citizens' voting, citizens' use of public services, in which the city card can be a tool, can be a good practice, like in this example here, that you'll find for sure. You'll find it under Pillar 2, you'll find it in sub-programs under Horizon Europe like Civitas. Civitas is more on transport, on efficient, sustainable and energy efficient urban transport, but again, the city card can be used for that. So again, there could be opportunities here and under Civitas. I brought also an example from H2020 project, this one that started already in 2015, it ended in 2018. 3 pilot cities, not big cities, as you can see, Pisa, Lorca, and Sierre. So 3 relatively medium, small cities. The project was also not too big, 2.5 million euros, with a European contribution of 2 million euros. In this case, it was under the efficient energy. And the objective was to develop an innovative IT ecosystem. Again, they don't call it a card, they call it an IT ecosystem, but it could be through a card, for improving energy efficiency through customer understanding, engagement, and behavioral changes. So again, it's a way of linking to the consumers, to the citizens, make them understand the impacts of their energy consumption, making them engage, having a reward system in order to cause a behavioral changes. So collect data, analyzes the available data as you do in a city card, provides interactive services, applications, and serious gaming in order to provide engagement and to provide behavioral changes. So exactly what you want to do with the city card, in this case specifically for improving energy efficiency in residential houses. So the outputs, a set of innovative serious games, personalized applications stimulating collaboration and interaction among end users, and target at behavioral changes in order to improve greater energy efficiency. It could be perfectly done with the tools, the methods, and the technology that you have been developing through the city card. So even calls, in this case, the call was new ICT-based solutions for energy efficiency, maybe one that doesn't immediately come into your filter, your screen, if you're looking for city card. But if you take it in a more holistic approach, like you've seen, smart cards, in the end they are used to, it's a new ICT solution, it's used for citizen engagement and behavioral change can be used for a lot of things, including energy efficiency. So there are many more, this is an example, and they go from 20 million euros to 2 or even smaller projects. In this case, 3 cities involved, small scale project relatively, but something that could perfectly be done using the same approach that you have in Cards for All. So me and Miguel and a lot of people here from our team have participated in H2020 evaluations. Some hints, it's very low success rate, that you have to be prepared for that. It's lower than URBACT for sure, even lower than Urban Innovative Actions, which is already relatively low. So typically what we are talking about 5%, maybe a bit more in some calls, maybe a bit less in others, but you know, in 100 proposals, 5 get approved, and the level of quality, because this has been on for a long time, you know, a lot of people have been participating for a long time, so it's much higher than in urban innovative actions. Most of the proposals you see are good. So it's not that immediately half you can say are no good. I would say 70 to 80% of the proposals that you see are good. Maybe they lack something, maybe not very focused, not to the topic, but they are good. So to make the difference, first you have to manage your expectations. You have to keep on trying. It's a continuous effort. You don't get to prove it once, you try again and again and again. So it's what we tell to our clients. It's like if you want to sell your products in Sweden, you know, you don't go there and immediately in the first trip you do to Sweden, you do a sale, you know. You need to go and make contacts and insist and to go again and give a lot of business cards and make a lot of meetings, and then eventually you'll be successful. And it's the same thing in here. It's a very professional game. So again, no room for amateur efforts. Proposals need to be professionally done. The partnership and the adequacy to the topic are key. So clearly you must adapt. The Commission in FP4, 5, they were very general topics. Now they are very specific. You know exactly what they are asking for, and you need to be adapted to that, and you need to have the right partners, and that's absolutely essential. Next session, we'll talk it in the end, but the idea is to have the next session, we take up a specific call from the European Green Deal, and we focus more on some hints for improving success in Horizon Europe, but I think could be useful for other proposals as well. So we'll come back to that. Apart from that, any questions regarding Horizon Europe? No? We've had examples? No? Okay.
Maybe we can open now a little bit the floor to participants because it's 15 minutes to 2.
Yeah, I will just very briefly, 2 minutes, go through Interreg, which is quick, okay. And then we'll open for questions. So let me just talk Interreg. So Interreg, it's been around for some time. You know, it's in terms of budget, it's always been increasing. Started with a very low budget of 0.02 million euros, and in the last program, reached the 10,000 million euros, and now the proposal for the next period is 8 billion euros. It's divided in 3 strands, as most people know. So cross-border, and the proposal for this is 5.6, so it's the largest by far. Transnational, so in contiguous areas across Europe, 1.5 billions, and then European, Interreg Europe, which has 0.5 billion euros. And what is left is for cooperation with the neighborhood countries. There is also some budget for there. So program approval expected for January 2022, so it's always a bit later than other programs. There is already a draft of the cooperation program. You can find it in the net since the 3rd of February. The objective is, again, improving regional development policies. So specifically in Interreg C, we are talking Interreg Europe, the proposals must be linked to policies, to regional or local programs. 80% of the budget will go for specific objectives under Smarter Europe and Greener Europe and More Social Europe. And the targets are mostly regional policy actors, including local authorities. So clearly a program where cities can participate. The program is implemented through inter-regional cooperation projects, which improve the implementation of regional development policies of the participate regions. There is a phase 1, 3 years for achieving policy improvement through basically good practice exchange. And then there is a 1 year for monitoring the results of the project. And like in Urbact, partners shall engage regional stakeholder groups to ensure the mobilization of stakeholders. That's Interreg Europe, where partners from different countries can participate. Interreg B, there are a series of programs. In Portugal, for instance, we have the South-West Europe, covers all of the country, all of Spain and parts of France. And we have the Atlantic, covers all of Portugal, the Atlantic area of Spain, the Atlantic area of France, UK, and Ireland. But each country has one or two Interreg areas where they can participate. And then there is the cross-border, and again, for areas that are close to border to other countries, and in Central Europe, all of them are, there are several programs in which they can participate. Again, a very fast example, this is an Interreg Europe project of 1.6 million euros, which is still running from municipalities. So Nicosia as coordinator, Prague, Devon, Ravenna, Cordélio, Viseu in Portugal, a municipal company from Vilnius and IASI, and it's for improving sustainable urban mobility plans, addressing policies that address smart ticking, ICT mobile applications, intermodality improvement. So again, city cards could very clearly be part of this. What is important for Interreg Europe is that each partner must be linked to a regional or local program. So for Nicosia, it's a national program for investment of growth and jobs, and the goal is to improve the implementation of this program. Some hints from Interreg, very different from program to program. Interreg Europe is very different from the transnational, which is more like typical collaborative projects, and very different again from the cross-border. Success rates, especially in Interreg Europe, because they don't have a lot of money, as you have seen, are low. And I would say, from what I've seen in the evaluations I participated, the quality is not exceptional. And again, professional proposals, if well written, can make the difference. Just to conclude, other programs, we can look at them a bit more in detail also in the next session. ESPON, for very target, more building statistics, building research on certain areas. Life Plus, more for infrastructural investments regarding to sustainable development. Erasmus Plus, if you are addressing qualifications, skills. And then this is an example, you'll have the presentation, you can see it's the Bloomberg Prize for Cities. If you keep an eye, if you Google city awards, city prizes, periodically there are some competitions for cities, and they can also be of some interest. Final slide on Digital Europe, but we can see it more in detail in the next session. There is this area for digital transformation that can be of interest also for cities. Okay, and this is 10 final minutes. Sorry for this faster introduction of Interreg, but I think it's also, at least from my point of view, the less interesting of the three. And now we can open the floor if you want to put any question, or if you want to share some experience from your participation, any comment, or what you'd like to see on the future session as well. So please come forward and let us know.
Okay, who wants to make a question? Or because I have one, and I shared this already with Laura and also with Eurico. I think that Horizon Europe can be a great opportunity for the extension of our activities. We have a lot of, we have the cities, we have the network, we have work that we developed during Car for All. But now we need to identify the opportunity to scale our activities and to focus in other areas that can upgrade our citizen cards. And looking to what Eurico mentioned about Horizon Europe, I would say that we can find there an opportunity. But Eurico, my question is about what should be the major trends. Are you talking about, for example, gamification or blockchain, or what should be the major trends that we should look to continue the work of Car for All?
I think in line what I have presented, I think everything related to open data, so the use of the data that you can collect also from the city cards. So open data, the mobility as well. So the use of city card for a more sustainable mobility, which is one of the big issues. And then, yes, gamification, engagement, civic participation. So the access to the citizens as a living lab or as a sandbox. So I think that's one of the biggest tools. I think it's also from the example that Laura has given. If you have a city card already operational or on developing, I think the way that you can use it for testing new ways of public participation, civic engagement, voting in a public election, voting for the participative budget, making polls, making inquiries, health support, so knowing if people are okay during crisis situations. I think that will be the biggest tool. I think it will really be important for cities that have already some experience with City Card to start promoting it as a evolving living lab. I think this will really be an asset for future Horizon Europe proposals. So if this works, you don't really need to go looking for proposals because they come looking for you. If you say, we are a group of cities which has been working with city cards and as such can offer access to, 1 million or 500,000 citizens that are connected through this IC system. We have access to data. We have access to direct communication channels. I think this is an advantage that I think it could be a very valuable trend for Horizon Europe.
Yes, maybe, now I have an idea because we are going to have another session related to this EU funding. Maybe, the cities that are going to participate in the second session, maybe they can think during this week about an idea of a pilot related to citizen card. And we will see, maybe we can make a small brainstorming and we will see if these ideas are suitable for a future project or not. Maybe we can leave in the next session 15 minutes to do this homework.
It's an excellent idea, very good. Also, part of the things that we are talking, it's not only the idea, but what kind of partners we can look further for that idea, how could we enrich the consortium, how we could communicate the idea even before submitting the proposal and start doing some lobbying in terms of communication in the social networks. These are things that we're going to cover. And if, in addition to a practical example from the Green Deal, if we could have an idea for a pilot and discuss some ideas around this, I think that's a very good suggestion.
Yes, that was the other point, because, as Miguel mentioned, the possibility of joining Horizon Europe, the second part is to find the right partners, because it's not only cities or companies, we need also universities, we need research institutions, we need product centers, we need different partners.
Yes, that's what we'll be looking at in the next session. We can see for a practical case, past one, but we can also do it for the future for what could be a pilot evolution of the city card.
Some comments?
Okay, I think that everyone is very interested in the second session to see the full picture about European funds. I don't know, Ulrike, you want to make a final comment and then Laura to close?
Yeah, so from my side, just to say then the next session, like we've seen, we're going to look at how could we improve the odds of success of a Horizon Europe proposal. And like Laura said, if we could think of a possible pilot application of a card for all, we could make it more practical and more useful for your own case. So Laura will put the doodle, we'll select the date. Maybe the idea will be to do it next week or the latest the week after. And again, the same format, we'll try the same time. And I hope to count with most of you. And thank you for participating. Session has been recorded and then we'll make it available full length for those who can bear it. And then a shorter edited version as well, so that you can have the highlights of the session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Eurico. We have now a really realistic and comprehensive overview about the funding. It was really wonderful because for me it was a little bit confusing, all the things related to next generation multi-financial framework, the different programs. And I also like the point that you focus the different programs to our example, to the citizen card, giving us some tips and hints as evaluator is really valuable. And as I told you before, we are going to send you an email with possible dates for the next session and also with the presentation. It's okay, no, Eurico, to share?
Yes, sure. I will send it to you. Laura, and then you can share
Perfect.
it.
And I can share the presentation to the participants and also to those colleagues that were not able to participate. And yeah, it was nice to meet you online again. And if you have also any questions, or if you want, because for this moment, in this group, we have Eurocities members, we have Urbat members, but I am the link person between the two networks. If you have any idea related future projects, or if you want a concrete contact of other city, let me know, and I can bridge all these contacts. And that's all from my part. Thank you for the participation and for the engagement. And we'll see probably in 1 week, more or less, for the second session.
Okay, thanks. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.